I know exactly what you're thinking. Did she really just start with that title? On stage, into a microphone, in front of people? Yes, I did. Because here's the truth, we don't talk about things we should talk about. We dodge the awkward, we avoid the vulnerable, and we end up tiptoeing around the truths that could actually set us free. And before you panic, no, I'm not here to give you a biology lesson. When I say penises, I'm talking about people. About personalities. About the different kinds of energy and behavior you are going to run into in your life. Because in reality, there are only 10 types you'll ever meet, and once you can spot them, you can navigate any conversation, any relationship, any argument, any business meeting without losing your mind or your self-respect. You've met the overcompensator, the one who's always too loud, too showy, desperate for validation. They're like a peacock with Wi-Fi, broadcasting their greatness whether you want to see it or not. Then there's the ghost, present when it's easy, gone when it matters, leaving you stranded with the hard stuff. You can't rely on them, and you shouldn't waste energy trying to. The know-it-all is next. They've got a fact for everything but somehow never a real solution. Then comes the victim. Life happens to them, never for them. If you spend too long listening, you'll start carrying their raincloud around on your own shoulders. The opportunist will make you feel important until something shinier comes along, because their loyalty moves on GPS tracking the next big thing. The rock is the opposite, steady, solid, the person you want in your corner at 2 in the morning when it all goes sideways. The dreamer will light you up with possibility but can't quite translate that vision into action, so keep them for brainstorming, not for deadlines. The critic is sharp, quick to spot flaws, and useful for catching mistakes, but if you take their words personally, they'll eat your confidence alive. The quiet storm seems calm until you're in the path of the hurricane they've been brewing for 6 months. And then, the rarest one, the giver. The one who shows up without keeping score, who pours in without expecting to get more back. When you meet that person, hold on tight. Because here's why all this matters. When you can name what you're dealing with, you stop taking it personally. You stop reacting on autopilot and start choosing how you respond. You stop wasting time trying to change people who are committed to being who they are. You start protecting your energy and surrounding yourself with the ones who lift you higher. You choose your inner circle like your life depends on it, because it does. And maybe, just maybe, you realize that sometimes the type you need to work on most is your own. People fall into patterns you can recognize. At first, it might not seem that way because human beings look endlessly complex, unpredictable, and unique, but when you strip away the layers of individual quirks and surface details, you start to notice the same behaviors repeating themselves over and over again. You meet someone at work who brags constantly, then a year later you meet another person in a completely different setting who does the exact same thing with the exact same kind of insecurity driving it. You run into one friend who vanishes whenever you're in a crisis, and later you meet someone else who mirrors that same disappearing act as if they were reading from the same script. The situations change, the faces change, but the patterns, they are remarkably consistent. And the sooner you learn to see those patterns, the faster you can understand what's actually happening in your relationships and interactions, and the less often you'll be blindsided by behavior that you could have predicted. Recognizing patterns starts with paying close attention to actions, not words. People can say anything, promise anything, present themselves however they want, but what they actually do will reveal which pattern they belong to. Maybe it's the colleague who offers help but never follows through, or the family member who always turns every conversation back to themselves. These aren't isolated moments, they're pieces of a bigger picture that, once you put together, shows you exactly who you're dealing with. It's a bit like watching a TV show. Once you've seen enough episodes, you know how certain characters will react before the scene even plays out. The same is true with people in real life. If you pay attention long enough, you can predict the beats before they happen. The human brain is wired to look for patterns, it's part of how we survive. Our ancestors learned to recognize that certain cloud formations meant rain, or that certain rustling in the bushes meant danger. In modern life, we're still using that same wiring, but instead of weather and predators, we're reading emotional and behavioral cues. The challenge is that a lot of us ignore the patterns we see because we want to believe people will change, or we hope the behavior we're noticing is just a one-time thing. But when you catch yourself making excuses for someone more than once, you're not dealing with a fluke, you're staring straight at a pattern. The beauty of recognizing these patterns is that it removes the element of surprise. You stop being caught off guard by the same type of behavior, and you start building strategies for dealing with it. You don't waste energy expecting the flake to suddenly become dependable, or the critic to suddenly turn into a cheerleader. You accept the data in front of you and adjust your expectations accordingly. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. It's knowing that if you've met one, you've met them all, because people in the same pattern behave almost identically even if they've never met each other. That's why meeting someone new can sometimes feel eerily familiar. You're not meeting them for the first time, you're meeting the type they represent. Sometimes patterns are obvious, like the loud, pushy person who always has to dominate the conversation. Other times they're more subtle, like the quiet friend who never directly refuses but somehow manages to avoid commitment every single time. The more you train yourself to see these patterns, the quicker your brain will pick them up. And once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them. It's like when you learn a new word and suddenly notice it everywhere, or when you buy a certain kind of car and suddenly every other vehicle on the road seems to be the same make and model. The patterns were always there, you just weren't tuned into them yet. One of the most useful things about spotting patterns is that it keeps you from repeating the same mistakes. If you've been burned by one type before, and you notice those same red flags in someone new, you can act sooner. You can set boundaries, limit your exposure, or decide not to engage at all. You stop touching the hot stove once you realize it's the same stove every time, just in a different kitchen. Recognizing these repetitions doesn't mean labeling people in a way that strips them of individuality, but it does mean acknowledging that human behavior often falls into predictable grooves. Those grooves are carved by personality traits, values, fears, and habits that people rarely change unless they are highly motivated to do so. Once you've experienced enough interactions, you start building your own mental catalog of these recurring personalities. It's not about judging them, it's about preparing yourself. You can't change the fact that the world contains these patterns, but you can absolutely decide how you'll respond when you see them play out. When you accept that people will show you who they are through repeated behaviors, you spend less time trying to decode the person and more time navigating the reality in front of you. And the more you recognize the familiar rhythms in people's actions, the more quickly you can adapt, protect your energy, and make choices that keep you from being stuck in the same frustrating loops. Naming the pattern removes personal sting. The moment you can call something what it is, you take back power from it. Most of the emotional pain we feel when someone behaves badly toward us comes from confusion and self-blame. We think, what did I do wrong? Or, why did they treat me this way? And those questions spiral into doubt and frustration. But when you recognize a behavior as part of a larger, well-worn pattern, it stops feeling like an attack on your worth and starts looking like a predictable script they've been reading from for years. It's like watching a movie and realizing you've seen this exact scene before. You know the lines, you know the ending, and suddenly you're not as invested in taking it personally because you understand it's not about you at all. When someone ghosts you after weeks of great conversation, your first instinct might be to replay every detail, wondering if you said something wrong. But if you've learned to name that behavior as the ghost pattern, you skip the self-punishment. Instead of feeling humiliated or unwanted, you say to yourself, this is the disappearing act. I've met this one before. That shift is more than just comforting, it changes your emotional reaction entirely. Instead of spiraling, you analyze. Instead of mourning the loss of something that wasn't real, you recognize the reality. This is just what that type does. The sting dulls instantly when you put a label on it. Labeling patterns creates a form of emotional distance. It doesn't mean you're cold or detached, but it does mean you no longer absorb the behavior as a reflection of your value. If a known critic points out flaws in your work, you don't crumble because you've already categorized them in your mind. You know that this is what the critic pattern does, they hunt for cracks in everything, even when something is solid. Instead of thinking, I'm not good enough, you think, that's their lens, that's their role in the pattern. This clarity protects you from drowning in unnecessary doubt. It's the same with relationships. Maybe you've been involved with someone who constantly overcompensates, buying expensive gifts they can't afford, talking loudly about achievements, always performing for approval. Before you learned about patterns, you might have thought their behavior was about impressing you specifically. You might have felt special when they showered you with attention and then hurt when they shifted that performance to someone else. But once you name it, you see that it's just part of their internal wiring. It's not personal, it's habitual. This understanding can still be disappointing, but it's no longer devastating because it's no longer a mystery. The human brain craves explanation. When something hurts and we can't explain it, we fill in the blanks with assumptions, and those assumptions almost always tilt toward blaming ourselves. Naming the pattern interrupts that dangerous reflex. It's like flipping on a light in a dark room. You stop stumbling around because you can see exactly what's there. You no longer have to guess whether the problem is you or them, because the pattern tells you everything you need to know. This approach also works in high-stakes situations like workplaces or negotiations. If you can identify that someone is operating from the opportunist pattern, you don't get offended when they choose another deal over yours, you anticipated it. If you see the victim pattern, you don't waste emotional energy trying to convince them to see the positives, you know they're attached to their narrative. The ability to name the pattern turns interactions into strategy rather than survival. You stop being a reactive participant in someone else's behavior and start being an observer with options. There's also a physiological benefit to this mental shift. When you take behavior personally, your body reacts as though you're under threat. Your stress hormones spike, your heart rate increases, and your brain moves into a defensive state. But when you recognize a pattern, you bypass some of that stress response because your brain doesn't register it as an unknown danger, it's a known file in your mental library. You might still be frustrated, but you're not consumed by the feeling in the same way. This keeps your judgment clearer and your reactions calmer. Naming patterns doesn't mean excusing them. It's not a free pass for bad behavior, and it doesn't mean tolerating what hurts you. It simply shifts the narrative from, this happened because of me, to, this happened because that's what this type does. That shift is everything. It lets you handle the situation without losing your sense of self-worth in the process. It puts the focus on the reality of their behavior rather than the imagined flaw in yours. And the more you practice it, the faster you'll spot patterns, name them, and strip away the unnecessary sting that used to keep you stuck in self-doubt and overthinking.